Why was she always the quietest one in the room? That morning, sitting at the back of the briefing table, Fay Thomas wondered if anyone even noticed she was there. Not once had a single voice asked for her opinion, and yet she had filled page after page in her notebook, diagrams, calculations, half-finished firing tables that had nothing to do with the communications work she was supposed to be focused on. At 23, with a soft Welsh accent and a frame that looked too delicate for war, she didn't look like someone built for this world. Around her, the hardened soldiers of the 3rd Battalion carried themselves with the loud ease of people who belonged. Laughter filled the corners of the room when the men spoke. Their confidence was a kind of armor. Fay, meanwhile, felt more like a shadow present but overlooked. The commander's voice droned on about patrol routes and possible insurgent activity in the north. Fay's pen stilled when the maps appeared on the projector. The ridges, the valleys, the outcroppings marked in red. She knew them better than anyone in that room. For months, she'd studied those lines on paper, and more than once she'd walked them in secret, pretending she was stretching her legs after shift. While they talked tactics, Fay's mind was already solving a different problem, a hidden equation, a firing solution. No one would have believed her if she'd said it out loud. The northern ridge they all dismissed as too far had been her obsession for weeks. Captain Reed, the unit's designated marksman, had just finished saying it wasn't practical, that nothing useful could be done from that range. Fay almost wanted to laugh. She had the numbers in her head, distances, wind shear, bullet drop. She'd run those calculations so many times she could see them layered over the terrain like invisible ink. But she didn't laugh. She didn't say anything. She just wrote quietly, hiding her real notes beneath the standard communication reports, the way she always did. Because if there was one thing she had learned in 8 months at Forward Operating Base Meridian, it was this: no one wanted her voice in these conversations. They didn't dislike her, they just didn't see her. Later, when 2 soldiers walked out ahead of her, she caught their words. "Good thing we've got Reed watching our backs," one muttered. "Yeah, having a real marksman makes all the difference, not like." The rest faded in laughter, but she knew who they meant. She walked on, eyes forward, calm, but inside the sting burrowed deep. They thought of her as a function, not a person, the comms girl, invisible, useful but replaceable. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Fay Thomas had been preparing for something none of them could even imagine. In the quiet hours, when the base fell into silence, she became someone else. Not the quiet communications specialist. Not the girl who could run diagnostics faster than anyone else but would never get invited to share a drink after duty. No. Alone in her bunker, she became the student of trajectories, of impossible distances, of wind shears that most people never even considered. It had begun years earlier on a farm in rural Wales, where her father, a former military marksman, had handed her a rifle and taught her that patience mattered more than strength, that a steady breath could do what muscle never could. By 15, she was hitting targets that local hunters laughed at until they saw it themselves. But when she enlisted, eager to put her skills to use, the recruiter had smiled politely and shuffled her toward communications instead. "Technical aptitude," they'd said. "That's where you'll be valuable." 8 months into this deployment, she still remembered that smile. She remembered how small it made her feel, and that memory pushed her to prove, if only to herself, that she was more than the box they'd put her in. The bunker was her sanctuary. The soldiers thought she was running diagnostics or doing routine checks. What she was really doing was laying out books on ballistics, tracing formulas into a battered notebook, running simulations in her head until her temples throbbed. Every spare dollar of her pay had gone into equipment no one else knew about: a custom barrel, precision optics, specialized ammunition tucked away in a private locker. Piece by piece, she had built a weapon that was hers alone. And she trained, God, how she trained. Not just firing at makeshift targets behind the comms facility, but writing every shot down: wind, temperature, humidity, angle, drop. She studied how the sun heated the valley floor and shifted currents by late morning. She knew which ridges caught the crosswinds first and which created deceptive mirages. She trained her body too, not for brute strength but for endurance. Hours of holding a position until her muscles burned, practicing breathing until her pulse slowed so much she could feel the space between heartbeats. Sometimes she wondered if it was madness, this private war she fought in secret. Was she preparing for something that would never happen? Or was she listening to an intuition deeper than logic, a quiet voice that whispered, "Be ready, you will be needed"? And yet, every day she was reminded of her place. She could run faster than some of the men during PT, but all she got were patronizing chuckles, not bad for a comms girl. She could point out blind spots in their radio coverage, but her suggestions were politely redirected or ignored. She could raise her hand in briefings, only to have her words fade into the background like static no one bothered to tune in. It wore her down, the invisibility, the quiet dismissal. But she kept preparing anyway. One evening, as the desert winds rattled loose sheets of metal outside the bunker, she sat alone with her rifle across her lap. The parts gleamed under the fluorescent light. She ran her hand along the barrel, thinking of the impossibility of it all. Shots at 2,000, even 2,500 meters, beyond the reach of every marksman in her unit, beyond what command would ever even authorize. She whispered to herself, as if to make the thought real. One day you'll matter. The loneliness was sharp, but beneath it burned a quiet determination. The men around her believed skill lived only in experience, in loud stories told over cards and drinks. Fay believed something else. She believed skill could be earned in silence. She believed knowledge mattered, even if no one cared to listen. And more than that, she believed this. When the impossible moment came, and it always came, in war, being invisible might mean being overlooked, but it also meant being underestimated. And sometimes, that was the greatest weapon of all. As she closed her notebook and locked away her rifle, she thought of the maps on the briefing table. The ridges, the northern valley, the impossible positions Reed had dismissed. Her hand lingered on the lock. She smiled faintly to herself. "Impossible," she whispered, almost amused at the word. Because Fay Thomas already knew, impossible was just another problem waiting for a solution. And though no one in her unit would ever admit it, that solution might come from the quietest soldier in the room. What hurt more, being ignored or being laughed at? Fay Thomas had stopped asking herself that question months ago because the answer didn't really matter. Both stung, both cut deep, both reminded her daily that she wasn't seen the way she wanted to be seen. She was a specialist in communications, a title that reduced her to a function. Radios, frequencies, encryption keys, vital work, but invisible when it was done well. No one praised a signal that worked. They only cursed when it failed. And so Fay lived in that gray space of being necessary, but never truly acknowledged. The soldiers weren't cruel to her, not really. But when they gathered in the mess hall, swapping stories of firefights and near misses, there was never space for her voice. When they joked over poker, teasing each other about scars or bad shots, she slipped quietly away, claiming she had diagnostics to run. It was easier that way. Easier to vanish before anyone remembered she was there. Still, there were moments she couldn't ignore. Like 3 weeks ago during a planning session, when she noticed a flaw in their radio coverage that could have left an entire patrol without contact in a valley choke point. She raised it, politely, clearly. The major had nodded absently, reassigned it to someone else, and moved on. The issue was never fixed. Only a sudden storm had canceled the mission. Fay wondered what would have happened if it hadn't. And then there was Captain Reed, their marksman, competent, sure. Out to 800 meters he was reliable, steady. But beyond that, he was like most soldiers, trained for practical ranges, not precision. One evening, in what she thought was a friendly conversation, Fay had mentioned techniques she'd studied for controlling spin drift at long distances. Reed had laughed, not cruelly but dismissively. That's textbook stuff, Fay. Real combat isn't about equations. It's about putting rounds on target under fire. All that theory doesn't mean much when someone's shooting back. She had smiled, nodded, and let the conversation die. But inside, something clenched tight. Because she knew he was wrong. And worse, she knew he'd never believe otherwise. The truth was, her knowledge frightened people, because it didn't fit. A communications specialist wasn't supposed to know about ballistic coefficients or the effect. She wasn't supposed to sketch firing solutions in her notebook when everyone else was doodling crude jokes. She wasn't supposed to know more than the man whose entire identity rested on being the real sniper of the unit. So they ignored her, or they laughed, or they gently warned her not to step outside her lane. Each dismissal was small on its own, but together they built a cage. Her sanctuary remained the communications bunker. There at least she had control. The radios obeyed her touch. The encrypted channels sang in her hands. And behind the locked door of her storage room, her real education continued. Her collection had grown over months. Ballistic computers, wind meters, advanced optics, tools she'd bartered for, begged for, sometimes bought outright with her own pay. Soldiers spent their salaries on games, cigarettes, little comforts from home. Fay spent hers on ammunition so precise it was sold by the round. Ammunition she logged meticulously in a notebook, each entry a story of environment and outcome. Her rifle was the centerpiece. Once it had been standard issue. Now it was hers, transformed piece by piece. The custom-machined barrel, the competition-grade trigger, the optic that could read a ridge line clearer than a pair of eyes. She built it the way some people rebuilt cars, carefully, obsessively, with love. And she didn't just shoot. She trained her mind. Every night she'd run scenarios, calculating trajectories for positions around the base. She had files for every ridge, every elevation, every likely sniper nest within 20 kilometers. Pages of angles, wind allowances, bullet drops. She memorized them until they became instinct, until she could look at a hill and know the number. Yet the more prepared she became, the lonelier it was. She couldn't share her progress, couldn't ask for help, couldn't validate herself against anyone else's standard. All she had was faith that what she was doing mattered, even if no one would acknowledge it. That faith was tested the day Major called her in. She had half expected it. Word had spread, whispers of her interest in things beyond her role. Soldiers muttering in the mess about how she tried to tell Reed where to put his rifle. Warnings that she was getting too ambitious. Now she sat in his office, service records spread across his desk. The man was competent, respected, but he believed in order, in people sticking to their specialties. To him, Fay was an excellent comms specialist, and that was all. "Thomas," he began, "your technical skills are outstanding, truly, but I've heard concerns. You're expanding into areas outside your duties, tactical discussions, sniper theory, equipment acquisitions that don't fall under your MOS. That's not what we need from you." She wanted to protest, to remind him she had never failed her communications work, that she had never once neglected her responsibilities, but she saw it in his eyes. He didn't care. This wasn't about performance. This was about boundaries. "The military needs focus," he continued. "Your lane is communications. That's where you'll serve best. I'm ordering you to scale back the extracurriculars. Concentrate on your job." His words were final. And when she left, the air felt heavier than it had before. But Fay was stubborn. She packed her materials, stored them deeper in the bunker, became more discreet. Unofficially, she doubled down, because she knew what didn't. Sometimes the world doesn't fit inside lanes. Sometimes the impossible arrives, and only someone prepared to step outside the line can answer it. Her suspicion was confirmed when the order came for role clarification training. Lieutenant delivered it like scripture. His office was precise, his voice clipped. He cited regulations, chapter and verse. Professional development must remain within occupational specialty. Tactical decision-making rests with authorized personnel. Unauthorized activities are prohibited. He slid a paper across the desk, a declaration that she understood her boundaries, a demand that she sign. Fay stared at it for a long time, then she signed. Because refusing would have ended her career. But inside she made another choice. The paper meant nothing. Her preparation would continue, because rules couldn't predict chaos, and chaos always came. And so the days stretched on, each one the same. Briefings where her notes went unread. Equipment checks no one appreciated. Nights in the bunker where she memorized more equations, conditioned her body to stillness, built her rifle into perfection. It was a cycle of invisibility. And yet with each passing day, she grew more certain. She was training for something no one else could see. She didn't know when it would happen, didn't know how. But she felt it deep as instinct. The impossible moment would come. And when it did, she would be ready. How many times could she swallow her voice before it broke her? Fay Thomas sat through another mission briefing, eyes on the map, hands folded neatly over her notebook. The major's voice echoed, steady and confident, describing insurgent activity near the northern sector. Patrol routes were drawn with thick markers, like children's chalk on pavement. Positions assigned, contingencies explained. And then came the part she dreaded, the sniper threat. A hostile shooter had been spotted near the supply route, 1,200 meters out, an elevated ridge overlooking everything below. Captain Reed, as expected, was assigned to counter. His plan was standard. Take a position 800 meters opposite, establish overwatch, return fire if the hostile exposed himself. It was neat, it was clean, it was flawed. Fay's eyes traced the angles, the ridges. She saw what the others didn't, the dead zones. Areas where Reed's field of fire wouldn't reach. A 400-meter stretch of road left vulnerable, blind to his scope. She knew it, the way a mathematician knows a wrong sum without solving the equation. When the briefing ended, she lingered. "Captain," she said softly as Reed packed his gear, "I think there might be gaps in coverage from your position, the ridge line." He looked up, expression already closing. "What kind of gaps?" 400 meters, maybe more. If the hostile shifts east, he'll on the road. There are alternative nests that cover it completely, but they'd require longer engagement. He sighed, dismissive, and she felt it like a slap. "You're overthinking this. We don't plan around hypotheticals. Real combat, about workable solutions, not theory. Leave the shooting to the shooters, Fay." Her throat tightened. "But I've studied." "You've studied." His smile was almost kind, almost patronizing. "You're a comms specialist. Keep the radios running, that's your job." The conversation ended there, but whispers spread quickly. Soon she overheard soldiers in the mess. "Did you hear the comms girl tried to tell Reed how to run his op? Next she'll be volunteering to carry the heavy weapons." Another laughed. And then came Sergeant Collins, Reed's second. He found her outside the bunker. "Fay, I heard about your input," he said carefully. "Listen, it's great you're interested, but maybe focus on your lane. We wouldn't want people thinking you're unhappy with your role." Unhappy. That was the word they used when someone wanted more, when ambition was seen not as strength but as trouble. Days later, Major called her in again. "You're exceptional at comms, Thomas," he said, reviewing her record. "But I'm hearing concerns. You're studying outside your scope, questioning tactics. That's distraction. The most effective soldier you can be is the best comms specialist possible. Nothing more, nothing less." Her chest ached, as though each word was another brick in a wall boxing her in. She left his office knowing what it meant. She was being formally reduced, contained. Not because she'd failed, but because she dared to see beyond her station. The final weight came 3 days later in his office. The paper, the signature, the line drawn permanent in black. She signed because not signing would end her career. But when she laid the pen down, she knew the choice was made. She would obey with her hands, but not with her heart. And then came the morning. 3:47 hours. Alarms ripped the base awake, sirens clawing through the pre-dawn silence. Fay jolted upright in the comms bunker, headset already on. The radios crackled alive with panic. Base command, this is Alpha Team. We're pinned at grid 4721. Hostile sniper has us locked. Request immediate support. Her fingers flew across the panel, isolating frequencies, clearing channels. Voices overlapped, tense, urgent. Alpha Team, 8 soldiers, 1 already hit. The sniper's position, Northern Ridge. Range, approximately 2,800 meters. Fay's stomach dropped. She knew that ridge, knew it intimately. Ridge 7 in her notes. She had pages of calculations on it, firing solutions adjusted for every possible condition. And she knew what Reed did not. The position was practically unassailable. It was fortress-like, shielded by rock. At that range, Reed's rifle might as well have been a child's toy. Base, this is Reed, his voice cut in, taut with frustration. Maximum effective range from my position is 1,200 meters. I can't reach the hostile. Repeat, I cannot engage at this distance. The radio went heavy with silence. 8 soldiers pinned, 1 bleeding, the marksman admitting he was powerless. Options were thrown like lifelines, artillery, no, too imprecise, air support, whether grounded, ground assault, suicide, each solution discarded as quickly as it was spoken. Meanwhile, Alpha Team's leader, Captain Richardson, was breaking. His voice cracked with desperation. We can't move. He's got us zeroed. Any attempt and he's on us instantly. 1 wounded, condition deteriorating, we need immediate. Fay pulled up the digital map, her eyes racing across the terrain. She overlaid her memory of Ridge 7, the calculations she'd written in secret. Distance, 2,847 meters. Elevation, 847 higher than any firing point near base. Winds, cross currents 15 to 20 knots. Every soldier, every commander would call it impossible. But Fay had been building for this exact impossibility. Her hands drifted to the locker, the rifle weighted inside. The optics gleamed in her mind. She had the weapon, the data, the discipline. But she also had the paper she'd signed, the orders she'd been given, the voices that had silenced her every time she tried to speak. And now those voices were floundering out of options, while soldiers bled. Major's voice returned grim. Alpha Team, maintain position. Prepare for extended siege. We're working on solutions. Fay closed her eyes. Extended siege, with a wounded man bleeding out, with a sniper who could hold them pinned for hours. His words weren't solutions, they were sentences. Her pulse slowed, her breathing steadied, months of preparation surged forward. She opened her eyes, and she made a decision. Fay Thomas reached for her equipment locker. Her hands moved with calm precision, unlocking, lifting, assembling. Not the comms gear, the rifle, the one she had built in shadows. Every piece clicked together with the ease of hundreds of rehearsals. She wasn't supposed to have it. She wasn't supposed to know what she knew. But if she didn't act now, 8 soldiers would die. And so the quietest voice in the room prepared to do what every other voice had called impossible. Was this courage or betrayal? Fay Thomas couldn't decide as her fingers tightened around the cold steel of her rifle. The comms console still buzzed behind her, voices spilling out, Alpha Team begging for solutions, demanding updates, Reed insisting the shot was impossible. The air was thick with orders, denials, desperation. But Fay had stopped listening. Because she knew what no one else dared admit. The solutions they clung to weren't solutions at all. They were stalling tactics, the kind of plans commanders wrote into reports so no one would say they'd done nothing. Meanwhile, a soldier was bleeding out in the dust. Time wasn't on their side. Her headset hissed with Richardson's voice. Base command, we've stabilized him temporarily, but he won't last much longer without any movement and the sniper on us instantly. Request. Request immediate suppression of hostile position. Suppression. The word cut deep. Reed couldn't even see the enemy clearly, let alone suppress him. Fay's eyes flicked to her notebook. Ridge 7, 2,847 meters. She had mapped it, calculated it, memorized it. The terrain, the winds, the thermals, she knew them better than anyone alive. She looked at the signed paper folded neatly in the corner of her desk. Role clarification. The reminder that she wasn't supposed to think beyond her lane, that her preparation was inappropriate, even dangerous. Her hand hovered, then clenched. If she obeyed, Alpha Team would die. If she might save them and destroy her career in the same breath. She made her choice. Switching the comms console to standby mode, she secured her headset to continue monitoring frequencies remotely. Then she opened the locker and pulled out her rifle case. The weight felt different today, not practice, not theory. This was consequence. Piece by piece she assembled the system. Barrel, optics, bipod, custom ammunition. Each movement was fluid, rehearsed until it was instinct. Her father's voice drifted back from childhood. Steady hands, Fay. Breath is your metronome. Trust the math, but never forget in the end it's you. The rifle slid together like it had been waiting for this moment. She slipped out through the maintenance exit, avoiding the main corridors where curious eyes might ask questions she couldn't answer. Her route had been planned months earlier, when she'd studied the terrain not as a radio operator, but as a marksman. Equipment storage yards, narrow service alleys, the outer perimeter. She moved through them quietly, her presence unnoticed. Beyond the wire, the land opened into the jagged ridges she knew so well. The climb to her position would take 25 minutes if she moved steady. She had trained for it in secret, timing herself, memorizing obstacles, marking cover. Tonight, those rehearsals became reality. The desert air was cool but already stirring with winds. The sun had just begun to warm the valley floor, sending ripples of heat that danced like ghosts across the horizon. Fay knew what that meant. The thermal window. The brief period where the atmosphere stabilized enough for extreme precision. She had perhaps 18 minutes once she reached position. After that, the air would twist and distort, turning a calculated shot into chaos. Her boots crunched softly against the rock. Her breathing stayed calm, even. Each step was deliberate, as if she were walking toward a moment she'd always known was coming. Behind her, the radio continued its grim chorus. Base command, we can't hold this position much longer. Negative Alpha Team, hold, we are coordinating solutions. Solutions, Fay almost laughed, bitter and silent. Halfway up the climb, her muscles burned. The ridge was steep, but she'd conditioned for this. Core strength, controlled breathing, packing, she moved like a ghost across the rocks. No sound, no wasted motion. And with every step, her mind returned to the same thought. What if I fail? Not because she doubted her math. She knew the numbers. She trusted the rifle. But what if, in the chaos of reality, the shot went wide? What if she revealed herself, disobeyed everything, and still lost the man on that ridge? Would they call her reckless, dangerous? Would they punish her not only for defiance but for futility? She swallowed the thought and climbed harder. When she finally reached the ledge, her chosen firing point, she dropped to her stomach, chest pressed against the rock. The world stretched out before her in brutal clarity. Through her scope, Ridge 7 came alive. The hostile sniper was there, exactly where she'd predicted. His position was fortress-like, carved between natural stone outcroppings. His discipline was obvious, no wasted shots, no unnecessary movement. Every time Alpha Team shifted, his fire followed instantly. He was no amateur. This was a professional, trained and confident. But his confidence was his weakness. He didn't think anyone could touch him from here. He thought himself invincible. Fay checked her chronometer. 11 minutes into the thermal window. 7 left before conditions would deteriorate. Her hands worked quickly, setting the bipod, adjusting the optic. She loaded a single round, match-grade hand, capable of traveling distances most soldiers laughed off as fantasy. Then came the calculations. Range 2,847 meters by laser. Wind 16 knots consistent from northwest. Compensation 4.7 moa left. Elevation adjustment 31.2 moa up. Temperature 23°C stable. Barometric pressure favorable. Humidity low. The numbers were steady, clean, feasible. But math was not the hardest part. The hardest part was the silence that followed. Through her scope, she watched him shift again, calm, methodical. She could see the confidence in his posture. He didn't fear them. He didn't fear anything. Her breath slowed. Inhale, exhale, pause. She steadied on the natural rhythm of her heart. She knew the exact moment of stillness, the fragile gap between beats where movement ceased. On the radio, Richardson's voice broke through, sharp with urgency. "Base, wounded soldier has lost consciousness. We need action now or we're going to lose him." Major replied, frustration tight in his tone. "Alpha team, maintain position. Counter-sniper solutions are in progress." Fay almost smiled. In progress, she was the progress, they just didn't know it. Her fingers settled on the trigger. This was it, the edge of defiance, the moment where silence became action. She whispered to herself, not prayer but resolve. Impossible only lasts until someone does it. Then she exhaled, and the world narrowed to a single crosshair. The rifle steadied, her muscles held like iron. 3 seconds of silence. And Fay Thomas prepared to fire the shot that everyone else said could not be made. 3 heartbeats. That was all she gave herself before breaking the silence. Through the scope, the hostile sniper shifted position again, smooth, disciplined, certain he owned the valley. Fay Thomas felt the weight of his confidence, the kind that came from years of never being challenged. He didn't know that somewhere, 2,847 meters away, a woman they all dismissed as a comms girl had him in her sights. Her breath slowed, her finger pressed. The rifle responded like it had been waiting for this moment as long as she had. The trigger broke clean. No flinch, no jerk, just a whisper of recoil against her shoulder. The shot was gone. For 3.2 seconds, time became something fragile. The bullet cut across air currents she'd memorized, dropped across gravity she'd calculated, rode the math she had rehearsed 1,000 times. Fay stayed on the scope, every muscle locked in place, waiting. And then impact. Through her optics, she saw it. The hostile sniper collapsed, his movement cut mid-action, his fortress of stone suddenly silent. No return fire, no shift, nothing but stillness. Her chest tightened, she had done it. For a moment she forgot to breathe. Then she exhaled, long and slow, as if releasing months of silence, dismissal, invisibility. On her headset, chaos erupted. "Base command, this is Alpha Team. Sniper position is silent. Repeat, position is silent." Richardson's voice cracked with disbelief. "No return fire, we're testing movement. Nothing, he's down." His voice followed, sharp, confused. "Alpha Team, confirm. We have no counter-sniper operations active in your area." "Confirmed, base," Richardson replied, still stunned. But something took him out. "We're clear to move." Fay stayed quiet, scope steady on the lifeless form. There would be no second shot, no correction needed. It had been perfect. And now 8 soldiers would live. Alpha Team began moving, voices rising in relief. "Wounded is moving too. Sniper is neutralized." "You're clear, Alpha Team," confirmed, though his voice carried the bewilderment of a man trying to understand an impossible event. Captain Reed cut in, his tone taut with frustration. "Base, I can confirm no hostile fire. Position is silent, but I don't have visual confirmation of what neutralized him. From my range, it just stopped. Fay carefully began disassembling her rifle, methodical, precise. Every piece slid back into its place. The optics, the barrel, the bipod. She wiped down the components, tucked them into the case, secured the latches. To anyone who saw her return to the bunker, she would look no different than she had hours before, just the quiet, calm specialist who had monitored the emergency. But she knew the truth. She had done what Reed said was impossible. What never would have authorized. What signed paper had forbidden. And yet it was done. Her boots moved steadily down the ridge, back toward the base. Every step was heavy with adrenaline, but her face remained calm. She forced her breathing to slow, forced her body to carry itself with the invisibility she had mastered. Behind her, the radio still buzzed. Relief filled the air now. Alpha Team had secured the wounded soldier, was in progress. The crisis was over. And no one knew why. When she slipped back into the bunker, the maintenance exit creaking faintly behind her, his voice was still sharp in her headset. Alpha Team, hold position for medical evacuation. Confirm again, no hostile movement. Confirmed nothing. The chatter continued as she set her rifle case deep into its hiding place. Then she slid into her chair and reactivated the comms console, her fingers calm, efficient. To anyone looking, it seemed she had been there all along, monitoring frequencies, doing her job. But her heart still pounded with the echo of the shot. For the next hour, the base was a storm of voices. Reports filed, updates given, confusion spreading. Pressed regional command for answers. Richardson kept repeating the same thing: the sniper was down, neutralized by forces unknown. Reed sounded almost defensive, explaining over and over that the shot was beyond feasible range, that he hadn't engaged. Investigators wanted explanations. None came. Theories surfaced: maybe friendly forces in the area, maybe equipment malfunction, maybe the sniper simply made a fatal mistake. But none of them were right. Fay stayed quiet, just the steady comms specialist, routing information, nodding at reports, her voice calm in the storm. When the evacuation was complete and the wounded soldier stabilized, relief swept the unit. Laughter even. Survival carried its own lightness, but beneath it all was mystery. How had the impossible threat vanished? In the days that followed, the investigation deepened. Specialists examined the hostile sniper's position. They found professional-grade equipment, evidence of training, a prepared nest designed to withstand counterfire. He had been good, very good, which only sharpened the puzzle. How had he been killed by a single, precise round from an angle no one believed possible? The ballistics told a story, though. One shot, clean, perfect trajectory. A kill that spoke of expertise far beyond standard training. But when they calculated the likely origin point, their faces darkened with disbelief. The angle suggested it came from a position that was officially inaccessible. Inaccessible unless someone had climbed it, unless someone had known exactly what they were doing. Captain Reed gave his account, honest but frustrated. I was in position, but I couldn't reach the range. No shot was possible from where I was. Whatever neutralized him wasn't me. The report concluded with the only explanation they could stomach. Hostile sniper, neutralized by unknown friendly assets with exceptional precision capabilities. Unknown assets. Exceptional precision. The mystery became part of the base's history, recorded in clean military language that hid the truth. That the shot had come not from a marksman, but from a woman no one thought could pull a trigger beyond a radio. Fay returned to her duties as if nothing had changed. Head down, quiet, efficient. Radios humming, reports written, invisible again. But she knew. She carried it in her chest like a fire. 8 soldiers alive, 1 impossible shot. She had waited her whole life for a moment like that, and when it came, she had been ready. Still, she knew what it meant. She had orders. She had violated everything they told her she couldn't be. If they found out, she could lose everything. But if she hadn't acted, men would have died. Which mattered more, obedience or life? She stared at her hands that night, still steady despite what they had done. She thought of her father's lessons, of the recruiter's smile, of papers, and she realized something simple, something final. Rules kept order, but courage saved lives. And sometimes dignity didn't argue. It didn't ask permission. It simply acted. Why was silence heavier than words? Fay Thomas had asked herself that question 100 times since the shot. Words could be dismissed, laughed off, silenced by rank. But silence grew louder every day. It pressed against her chest, an invisible weight reminding her of what she carried. The base moved on quickly, at least on the surface. Patrols resumed. Laughter returned to the mess hall. The wounded soldier stabilized, his name whispered with relief. Richardson made rounds, shaking hands, clapping shoulders. We should all be dead, he admitted, but someone somewhere had our backs. That someone became the mystery. Soldiers swapped theories in hushed corners. Some swore it had to be Allied special forces operating covertly. Others believed a drone strike, so precise it mimicked a rifle. A few muttered superstition that maybe luck itself had pulled the trigger. But no one, not once, suggested her name. Fay carried on as always. Radios tuned, signals routed, reports filed. Invisible, necessary, replaceable. Only now invisibility was her shield. Every time the investigation circled closer, she lowered her gaze, kept her voice steady, played her role. But the questions sharpened. Major convened debriefs, his frustration obvious. He hated unsolved puzzles. A sniper of that caliber doesn't just collapse. Someone took him out, and I want to know who. Reed, are you holding back? Reed's jaw had tightened. No, sir. I was in position but out of range. I logged every shot I didn't take. You'll find the report clean. Then who? Demanded. Silence answered him. Fay sat in the back, eyes on her notepad, drawing lines that looked like frequency calculations but were firing solutions, disguised in her private code. Her hands never shook, but inside, every nerve was taut. Later stopped her outside the mess. His tone was casual, but his eyes sharp. Strange, isn't it? He said. An impossible shot at an impossible distance, right when we needed it most. Don't you think it's odd, Specialist Thomas? She kept her face neutral. Yes, sir, very odd. You spend a lot of time with data. Ever seen anything like it? No, sir, nothing like it. He studied her for a beat too long, then nodded. Good. Keep your focus where it belongs. She walked away, her calm steps hiding the storm inside. Did he suspect? Or was he simply probing, testing everyone? She couldn't tell, but his gaze lingered in her mind long after. The weight of her silence didn't just come from fear of discovery. It came from the moral fracture it opened. She had done the right thing, saved lives, stopped a killer. But she had also disobeyed, broken trust, violated the rules that bound them together. And rules were the foundation of everything here. Without them, chaos reigned. Without them, soldiers died. But hadn't she also proven the opposite? That sometimes rules blind and only disobedience saves. The question chewed at her in the nights. She lay awake in her bunk, listening to the low murmur of men sleeping nearby, the distant hum of generators, the occasional crack of gunfire from some far patrol. She stared at the ceiling and wondered, if they knew, would they thank her or condemn her? She remembered Reed's laugh, the recruiter's smile, clipped tone, and she knew the answer: condemnation, not because she was wrong, but because she had stepped outside her lane. The silence grew heavier. 3 days later, an unexpected order rattled the base. Regional Command had flagged the incident as strategically significant, announced it at assembly, his voice tight with restraint. Headquarters is dispatching an inquiry team. They want answers. They want to know how one of the most dangerous snipers in the region was neutralized without authorization. We'll cooperate fully. All of you will be interviewed. The words struck like cold steel. Fay kept her expression still, but her heart lurched. An inquiry team, not just asking questions, professionals, people trained to sift through lies, to pull truth from silence. That night she sat in the bunker long after the others had left. The radio hissed faintly, empty channels breathing static. Her rifle lay hidden behind a locked panel, unseen but never forgotten. She traced her fingers over the desk, feeling the invisible weight of choice pressing down again. Confess? Impossible. They would end her career, strip her of rank, brand her reckless. Worse, they might question her fitness to serve at all. Deny? Safer. But denial meant living with silence forever, carrying a truth that no one else would ever know. The inquiry arrived 2 days later. 3 officers in crisp uniforms, their notebooks sharp as knives. They set up in his office, and one by one, soldiers were summoned. Fay listened through the walls, voices muffled but tense. Reed's interview lasted longest. When he emerged, his face was set in stone. He didn't speak to anyone. Then it was her turn. She walked in, spine straight, heart steady. The officers studied her, their gazes clinical. One asked the questions. The other 2 watched her eyes, her hands, her breath. Specialist Thomas, you were on comms during the Alpha Team incident. Yes, sir. You monitored all frequencies. Yes, sir. Did you observe any indication of friendly assets operating in the area? No, sir. Did you personally witness the hostile sniper being neutralized? No, sir. I only heard Alpha Team's confirmation. They pressed further. Your background shows exceptional technical aptitude. Have you received training in marksmanship beyond standard qualification? Her pulse spiked, but her voice stayed even. No formal training, sir, just standard issue. Do you have any theories on who might have neutralized the hostile? She hesitated just enough to seem thoughtful. Possibly covert Allied assets or equipment malfunction, I can't say. The officer wrote notes. The others kept watching. She breathed steadily, controlled. Her father's lesson echoed. Patience isn't waiting. Patience is being still while the world tries to move you. At last they dismissed her. She walked out calm, but inside the storm howled. Days passed. The inquiry gathered statements, analyzed reports, measured possibilities against impossibilities. In the end, their conclusion matched the earlier one. Hostile sniper neutralized by unknown friendly forces, method undetermined. Case closed officially. But among the soldiers the whispers grew louder, theories spun wider. Reed brooded, quieter than before, watched her more closely now, his casual greetings edged with suspicion, and carried the mystery like a thorn, unsolved and irritating. Fay returned to her duties, her silence intact. But the weight of it grew heavier still. She found herself walking the perimeter one evening, the sky bleeding into twilight. The desert stretched vast and endless, the same land she had mastered in silence. She thought of the man on Ridge 7, the confidence in his posture, the way he had fallen in an instant. She thought of the soldiers alive because of it. And she asked herself, was silence still the right choice? Because maybe the truth wasn't about recognition. Maybe it wasn't about career or punishment. Maybe it was about owning what she had done, no matter the cost. Her hands tightened into fists. She wasn't sure anymore. But she knew this. The impossible shot had changed everything. Not just for Alpha Team, not just for his reports. For her. She had crossed the line. She had proven to herself that she was more than the role they gave her, that her quiet resilience had teeth. And the silence she carried was no longer just weight, it was power. But power always came with a price. Why did secrets feel louder in silence than in speech? Fay Thomas carried hers like a hidden flame tucked close, invisible to the world, yet she felt its glow against her skin with every step. No one said her name. No one accused her, but suspicion had a way of filling the air like smoke. You couldn't always see it, but you could smell it. The inquiry team left after filing their vague conclusion, but the unease didn't leave with them. It clung to the base, whispered in the mess hall, carried in sidelong glances. Soldiers swapped stories, none of them true. Reed still brooded, packing outside the firing range late at night, squeezing his jaw like he could grind the mystery into dust. Remained polite, professional, but Fay caught his eyes on her too many times, too long. Avoided speculation in public, but his tone in briefings carried tension, the clipped sharpness of a man still chasing an answer he couldn't find. And Fay, she became smaller, quieter. She buried herself in the radios, in the hum of signals that asked nothing of her but clarity and discipline. She was the shadow in the corner, the steady hand at the console, the invisible thread tying everyone together. But she was also the shot, the impossible round, the one no one could explain. And silence, she realized, was beginning to consume her. One evening she found herself at the firing range, alone. The others had finished their drills hours earlier. The night was thick, the desert wind carrying sand in faint whispers. She unlocked a case, assembled her rifle with the precision of ritual, and lined up a target. Not at 300 meters like the others trained, not at 800 like Reed practiced. She set her optics to 1,600, the farthest the range allowed. Too far for most, but to her, it was comfort, a reminder of where she truly lived. Her shot rang out, cutting the silence. The target fell, a distant clang against steel. She adjusted, fired again. Another hit. But even alone, she wasn't free. Footsteps echoed behind her. She turned, heart spiking, to see Reed standing just beyond the light. He didn't speak at first. He only watched her, his face unreadable. "You're not supposed to be out here after hours," he finally said. She kept her rifle steady, her voice calm. "Neither are you." He stepped closer, his boots grinding into the gravel. "Funny thing, I've been trying to make sense of Ridge 7. Every time I run the math, every time I check the reports, I come to the same answer. No one in this unit could have made that shot. Not me. Not anyone." Her throat tightened, but she didn't move. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying," his eyes narrowed, studying her hands, the way they rested on the rifle like it was an extension of her body. "I think someone, been training in silence. Someone who doesn't like being told where their lane ends. Someone who might just be capable of the impossible." The wind whistled across the range. Her heart thudded slow, heavy. This was it, the moment. But Reed's face shifted, not anger, not accusation, but something quieter, something like bruised pride. "If it was you," he said, voice low, "you'll never be recognized, you know that, right? They'll never put your name in the report, they'll never thank you. At best, they'll punish you. At worst, they'll erase you." Her breath caught. His words weren't a threat, they were truth. "So what do you want, Captain?" she asked. He held her gaze, then shook his head. "I want to believe it was you, because if it was," his voice trailed, but she heard the weight in it, "then I've been the one in the wrong, and I don't know if I can live with that." He turned and walked away, leaving her in the wind, her rifle still warm in her hands. That night she couldn't sleep, not because she feared exposure, but because Reed's words cut deeper than any accusation. They weren't about punishment. They were about recognition, about the chasm between what she had done and how it would never be acknowledged. And for the first time, she wondered if silence was not just safety, but erasure. The next morning summoned her. His office was ordered, his papers stacked in neat rows. He gestured for her to sit, his tone courteous but the air heavy. "Specialist Thomas, you've always impressed me with your diligence. But diligence isn't always the same as obedience. I need to ask directly. Do you have any knowledge about what happened on Ridge 7? Her pulse throbbed, but she kept her eyes steady. "No, sir." He studied her for a long time, the silence stretched. Then he smiled faintly, though his eyes stayed cold. You know truth has a way of finding its way out even when buried, but secrets, they rot slowly, quietly, until they poison everything around them. I'd hate to see that happen here. Dismissed, she left with her heart pounding. Didn't have proof, but he had suspicion, and suspicion was sometimes enough to ruin a life. The tension became unbearable. Every glance in the hallway felt loaded. Every briefing, every offhand joke, every silence seemed sharpened against her skin. She carried her duties with precision, but her nights were restless, her mind replaying every sound, every suspicion, every word. And yet amid the fear there was pride. A stubborn, quiet pride. Alpha Team was alive. She had done that. No report could erase it. No inquiry could rewrite it. 8 men breathed because she had refused to obey. Still, pride didn't protect against exposure. And she could feel it coming, like a storm building over the desert. The question gnawed at her. When her silence finally collapsed, what would she choose? Denial until the end, or truth no matter the cost? The answer didn't come easily, but she felt it drawing near. Because sometimes storms don't wait. Sometimes they arrive suddenly, without warning, and she knew one was already on its way. How long could silence last before it shattered? Fay Thomas had lived with hers like a shadow, close, loyal, protective. But shadows lengthen, twist, and sometimes reveal more than they hide. The storm had been building, and she felt it now. The shift in the air, the quiet anticipation in the base. Something was about to break. It started with Reed. 2 weeks after Ridge 7 announced a training demonstration. Standard marksmanship exercise, meant to restore confidence after the chaos of the sniper incident. Soldiers gathered at the firing range, weapons cleaned, targets set. The air was alive with banter, lightness masking fatigue. Reed stepped forward, rifle in hand, his confidence sharp as ever. He hit target after target with ease, his groupings clean, his form textbook. Applause followed, pride mixing with relief. That, declared, is discipline. Then Reed surprised them. He turned, his gaze landing on Fay, who stood at the edge of the crowd, notebook in hand, just another silent observer. "Specialist Thomas," he called, his voice carrying, "step forward." The air shifted, heads turned, whispers flared. Fay froze, pulse quickening. Reed's face was unreadable. "You've been studying more than radios, haven't you? Show us." She opened her mouth to refuse, to deflect, but cut in, annoyed. "Captain, this isn't appropriate. Specialist Thomas is not." "With respect, sir," Reed interrupted, eyes still locked on her. "I think we should see what every soldier here is capable of, even those we underestimate." The silence was suffocating. Fay felt the eyes of dozens on her, curiosity, suspicion, even amusement. Her body wanted to shrink back into invisibility, to dissolve into the background like she always had. But she didn't. She walked forward, steady, deliberate, and took the rifle Reed held out. The weight settled into her arms like it belonged there. She checked the chamber, adjusted the scope, lowered into position. Around her, voices muttered, jokes, doubts, half-suppressed laughter. The comms girl with a sniper rifle. What a scene. Her breath steadied. She blocked out the noise. She saw only the target, 800 meters, far beyond the comfort of most. She adjusted, calculated, felt the wind against her cheek. Inhale, exhale, pause. Trigger break. The steel rang, a perfect hit. The laughter stopped. She fired again, another hit, grouping. The murmurs shifted, confusion replacing amusement. By the 5th shot, silence had taken the range. Soldiers stared, some with mouths open, others with frowns deepening. She lowered the rifle, stood slowly, and handed it back to Reed. He held her gaze for a long moment, then gave the faintest nod. Not approval, not apology, something quieter, recognition. Broke the silence, his voice sharp, unsettled. "That's enough. Specialist Thomas, return to your duties." But it wasn't enough. Not for the men who had watched her do what they didn't expect. not for whose suspicions now had teeth, not for Fay herself, who felt her secret slip from the shadows into the open. That night came to her. His tone was clipped, his words precise. "I know," he said, "no greeting, no pretense. You broke every boundary of your role, you disobeyed, you acted outside command, and yet," his jaw tightened, "without you, Alpha Team would be dead." Her chest tightened. "So what happens now?" He studied her, his silence heavy. Then, nothing official, the report stands as written. But understand this, you've crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. Some will never forgive you for it, some will never believe it. And some, his eyes softened just slightly, will never forget it. He turned, leaving her with the echo of his words. The days that followed were strange. No charges came, no formal accusations, but the whispers shifted. Doubt had turned to curiosity, curiosity to something else, something harder to name, respect. Maybe, unease, certainly. But either way, she was no longer invisible. Alpha Team sought her out quietly one by one. Richardson clasped her hand, grip firm. "I don't know if it was you," he said softly, "but if it was, thank you." The wounded soldier, pale but alive, whispered the same words from his cot. Gratitude not official but real. Reed avoided her, though his eyes carried something different now. Not dismissal, not mockery, something heavier. The look of a man forced to confront the possibility that he had been wrong. Fay carried on, still at the radios, still steady, still professional. But something had changed inside her. The silence was still there, but now it was chosen, not forced. She no longer carried it like a burden. She wore it like armor. Because she understood now. The shot wasn't about recognition. It wasn't about proving herself to or Reed. It was about the men who lived. The voices on the radio that hadn't gone silent. The soldier who breathed because she had refused to let fear or rules decide his fate. Late one night she walked the perimeter, stars sharp above the desert. She thought of her father, his lessons whispered at dusty ranges, his quiet belief in her. She thought of the recruiter's smile, the papers she'd signed, the laughter she had endured. She thought of Ridge 7, the impossible shot, and the silence that followed. And she realized the truth she had been circling all along. Strength wasn't always loud. It wasn't always celebrated. Sometimes it was invisible, carried in shadows, hidden in silence. Sometimes it was doing the right thing, even when no one saw, especially when no one saw. Fay Thomas would never be in the report. Her name would never mark the kill. History would record Ridge 7 as neutralized by unknown assets. The world would never know. But she did, and the soldiers who lived did. And that was enough. She stood alone under the stars, the desert wind brushing against her face, and let the silence settle once more. Not heavy this time, not suffocating, but calm, steady, free. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.